All right, are we good? Are we live? I think we are. Hello all and welcome back to the Women's Football Chat Live. We are here for the WSL Weekend Roundup. 18 match weeks of the WSL season under our belts, and we're starting now, or we're finishing almost, to see how this table is going to stack up. A lot to go through today. Lots of results that were unexpected. Lots of results that perhaps weren't so unexpected, but Harry, nice game week of WSL action. Not so great, personally, but a lot of action.
Yeah, as you say, a lot of action. I think that this game week fully summed up the saying in football that it is that you get a game of two halves. There were a lot of fixtures, I think, across the weekend that were swung one direction in the first half and went the complete opposite way in the second half. And I think that was the case for at least 3 or 4 of the games. But yeah, as you say, not many game weeks left now, so every point matters, every match matters, and drops of points can be seen as a bit of a big blow to teams wanting to end the season in certain positions. But yeah, I think this was an important match week for how the table is looking to finish.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, let's dive in then to the opening game. The biggest surprise of the weekend. London City Lionesses 1-1 Chelsea. This was a proper game of two halves. I've seen a lot of people criticise Chelsea. I think there is some fair criticism, but I think it's been a little too heavy because a lot of people I think have seen the result and probably not watched the game. But let's start with that first half because I don't think there's anything wrong with saying Chelsea were completely dominant in the first 45 minutes.
Yeah, they were the better side in the first half, definitely. I think that, as you say, they had the better chances. London City didn't really threaten. They played well. They forced some good saves out of Lette. Obviously, they took the lead in the first half. But yeah, it was 45 minutes where Chelsea, I think I said at the time, they were playing well enough to win the game. And that's exactly what every side is looking to do at this point in the season. We'll mention it later on. We mentioned it last week with sides like Arsenal, for example, against London City. They weren't amazing, but they were good enough to win the game. And that's exactly what Chelsea were in the first half. Obviously, in football, you have to do that for 90 minutes. But for 45 minutes, Chelsea played well enough to beat London City. It's why they went into the break leading. And overall, yeah, they played well in that first half.
Well, yeah, more than 60% possession. They had 10 shots. London City only mustered up 1. The big problem again, though, is clinicality. And it felt there was a real turning point. And it's just after the half in both this game and the Arsenal game for me. And I think those are the most important moments in these two games. And we'll get to Arsenal later, but they scored in the 47th and went on to absolutely drub West Ham after a first half where they had chances and hadn't taken them. Chelsea, first half, dominated, had loads of chances, couldn't quite take them. Carnegie, really nice goal. That was a great little nod over the shoulder from Angie Beaver-Jones. Carnegie was in, and that was a lovely move. Then, right at the start of the second half, Angie Beaver-Jones threw on goal, has to score for me.
Yeah.
I think it's an inexcusable chance to miss. And she had a really good game up to this point, but missed that opportunity, gets injured a few minutes later. Obviously, nothing she can not really have fault on that one. But that was the big turning point in the game because it just seemed London City had already made changes at the break, and that just seemed to give them the confidence then for the rest of the match.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a massive opportunity that most elite number 9s in the world should be putting in the back of the net, and Beaver-Jones will be disappointed with that. But yeah, London City, it seemed to give them a bit of confidence. They fancied themselves. I said in the pre-match that if you're LMI straight, you'd think that Chelsea were there for the taking with the amount of rotation, with the amount of injuries. Their eyes should have lit up at an opportunity to try and take something off Chelsea. And I think that we saw that come to fruition in the second half. They played brighter, they got the ball down, they started to play some very decent football, some of the best football we've seen them play all season. We've criticised them a lot, but I think they really started to get their foot on the ball in this game. And yeah, they fancied themselves, they backed themselves to go and get something, and they reacted really well to that Beaver-Jones miss.
Yeah, they reacted well. They started, obviously, they made a sub at half time, and that was a really positive change. Took off Daniele van der Donk, who I think really struggled with the physicality of the midfield, and the game was just bypassing her. And London City just weren't getting her into positions to be involved in the match. So they took her off, brought in Lucia Corrales, a ball carrier. I think that was such an important difference maker, and we'll get to the moment where she was able to impact the game the most later. But it gave them width then in attack, and it gave them someone that could carry the ball forwards. And we started then to see the tide turn. Beaver-Jones had that opportunity, a little bit against the run of play, actually, in that first half, but it was in the 47th minute. Has to score that chance. Chelsea only had 2 shots, though, after that, which is criminal. But London City were fantastic after that point. A real game of two halves. After the Beaver-Jones injury, they made a triple change in pretty much the same moment. Yeah, that was Paris, it was Marsetto and Godfrey off. that triple change was really important because they brought onto the pitch Yulia Roda, Delphine Cascarino, and Isabel Goodwin. And we were saying it before it happened, but this game was crying out for a number 9 for London City. They had no one that could hold the ball up. It was crying out for someone to be a little bit more dynamic in that wide position, and they needed to be a bit surer in midfield. And those substitutions they'd made them, and it was a bold decision from Maestre, and massive respect to him for doing it. That quadrupled change he had made, or 4 substitutions he had made, in the first 20 minutes of the second half, completely changed the tide. Because what they were able to do, or first 10 minutes really, the second half, what they were able to do then was dictate the game a little bit more. They win the ball back more consistently in midfield. They had wingers on either side who were being dangerous and stretching the pitch quite wide. They had a striker they could aim for in the box, and they were able to force Chelsea back. And it's very rare that you see this Chelsea team forced into their own penalty area, but for a large part of that second half, we saw 11 players behind the ball for Chelsea. And while London City subs were really good, Harry, Chelsea's missed the mark.
Yeah, I thought that across the board, from the players that came on who didn't do anything to the changes that Bonpastor made, was very, very bizarre. We said it on the stream. At that point in the game, Chelsea were sleepwalking into a drop of points here. We could see it come from a mile off, and there was just no reaction. Baltimore came on at half time, and I thought that the work rate was miles off it. I mean, she looked like she'd been on there for the longest out of anyone else, but she'd been on the pitch the least. She should have been the one running around and putting the effort in. That was really disappointing. And then I thought the subs, the changes midway through the second half were really wrong. And I think that Chelsea felt the pressure. Bonpastor felt the pressure. She was trying to balance between making sure Chelsea won this game and resting up for Tuesday or tomorrow, and she just didn't know which way to go. In the end, she favoured resting up for Tuesday, and it shot Chelsea in the foot. And it's a difficult dilemma as a manager when you haven't got too many options, but you've got to be resourceful. You've got to work with what you've got, and I think Bonpastor got it wrong.
Yeah, I agree. I think, to an extent, I agree. I think there's a big point you're missing there, and I think it's what a lot of people are missing, is that yes, she's resting for Tuesday, and there was definitely one eye on the game, which is important. I think the Champions League is so much more important than the league at this stage in the season for Chelsea. But they're also managing minutes. If you look at all the players that came off, Carla Reid has had injuries, and they're managing her minutes. We saw her rested in the week, played half here, now getting rested with the idea that she'll then be able to play on Tuesday. We saw Buchanan come off. She's just back from a major injury. We saw Chloe Sarwi. Now, that one I disagree with. That was because why take Chloe Sarwi off? Unless she's going to start Tuesday, which, I mean, there's every chance with the problems that Chelsea have got right now. But, so I could see that. But unless she's going to start Tuesday, why not give her the full 90? She was one of Chelsea's best players, defending so well. And instead, you took her off, you pushed Berman wide, and suddenly what you had was that Berman was having to deal with Cascarino, and Cascarino just came inside and made it so difficult for Chelsea to know who was supposed to be picking her up. And that was really dangerous. And I think if they left Sarwi on there, they may have dealt with that better. They then later took off Sioka Nuskin, who's played a lot of minutes recently, and shuffled the pack around. Obviously, they took off Beaver Jones, who had to come off. She was injured. So apart from the Sarwi one, which is where I think that the problem is, they had to make all those changes. Where I would argue is that I think they could have left Buchanan on there because centre-half, it's not as fatiguing a position, and considering Chelsea had dropped quite deep, she probably wasn't going to pick up any or aggravate any injury. I think I'd have left Buchanan and Sarwi on, brought Bronze on as they did, and put her at right back and just shored things up. But I understand Bonpastor's subs when you think about the number of injuries Chelsea have at the moment. You think about the players that came off and the fact they're having to manage those minutes. Yeah,
I agree. I think that also at the end of the day, the players that came on are still elite professional footballers. I mean, I mentioned that Baltimore came on at half time and was really poor, but you know, Lucy Bronze, Naomi Germer, these aren't random people you found on the street. These are, elite footballers who came on and didn't put the performance in. I think that's the other thing that sold Chelsea short, was the players that did come on just didn't put the effort in. They didn't come on and react. That's the whole point. Subs meant to come on and change the game and make a difference, and that didn't come. And Chelsea they seem to come on and just nothing changed for Chelsea. And yeah, there's not Bonpastor can't do anything about that. If the players she brings on don't put the effort in and don't react, then as a manager, you're left with no options.
Yeah, I completely agree. I thought all the subs actually, James included. I think James's work rate is underrated. I think the problem with James coming on isn't that doesn't work hard, it's that she has no positional discipline. And that's what makes her so special. But in a game where you actually just need to see out a victory, I don't understand that decision. But Sjokonowski was absolutely blowing. But why not bring on Lois Shooter?
Yeah.
And, she's good enough to make the bench. Give her that opportunity. So that one was a bit of a difficult one for me. And I'd have rather rested James up because she's going to be so important over this Champions League quarter-final over the 2 legs. So, yeah, I'd have rather seen her continue to be rested. But Kira Walsh was nowhere near the standard. And it's been odd. I think Walsh had some fantastic games this season, but she's also had some where she's just gone missing. And I think in this game where there was a lot more energy about London City's performance, because that was the biggest thing. I think Chelsea tired so quickly. And it does make sense. Chelsea played so many games at the start of this year, and they don't really have the squad at the moment with a number of injuries and absentees. They don't really have the squad now to rotate effectively. So there is a very justifiable reason why Chelsea looked very tired, but I still think they're professional footballers out there. And there were some players who came off the bench and weren't giving. They're all Sjokonowski looked knackered in the set up to the 78th minute when she came off, but she still kept chasing after the ball with everything she had left. Baltimore came on at half time. We didn't see that same desire. Walsh came on in 63 minutes. We didn't see that same desire. And I think that was a big problem for Chelsea. They didn't have the players to bring off the bench to make an impact. And this is where, we talk about a lot about how poor London City's squad building has been, and I stand by that point. But this is where you can bring on Delphine Cascarino.
Yeah.
And you can bring on Isabel Goodwin. And you can bring on Lucia Corrales. And that does make a big difference. And actually, when you look at the changes that London City made in attacking areas compared to the changes that Chelsea made, Chelsea ended up with a front three, which, we saw it in the week with Sawi in left wing, but they ended up with a front three of James. They had Thompson in there, and I think Sondy Baltimore was still in a front three at that point. But you've got their 2 players that come back from major injuries. Baltimore, who was not doing much anyway. London City arguably had more impact with their subs. So yeah, Chelsea hit massively by injuries, but I think the subs that did come on didn't offer very much at all, and it kind of cost Chelsea.
Yeah, it did. It did massively. I think that's the thing, is that Chelsea weren't great, and London City deserved everything they got. They played well, and I think that they did well to punish Chelsea. I think that there are times that if London City had played like they have for the majority of this season, I think Chelsea would have got away with it. But they upped it in that second half. They played very, very well. They moved the ball. It's the best I've seen them on the ball all season. And I think maybe they're starting to see what Eder Maestre wants to bring. Who knows? We'll see if it remains consistent. But I think they did well to raise their game, to punish Chelsea for not being at 110%. The goal was the initial shot was well worked. Bit of fortune with the way that Hampton saved, and it loops up perfectly for Goodwin to head home. But they got the goal. That goal was coming for 25-30 minutes before it went in. We said it. Chelsea were always going to concede in that game because nothing was changing, and London City fully deserved the point. It was a well-earned point. They rode their luck a little bit in the first half, got the rub of the green, but they made it count in the second half and pulled Chelsea back. And yeah, I think, again, it comes down to very, very different halves of football.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we speak about the difference between Arsenal and Chelsea and that turning point, difference between London City and West Ham, because actually their first halves were pretty identical. They were pretty open. They probably could have conceded more. They only took 1 shot each, but in the second half, West Ham still didn't have another shot. London City in the second half, 14 shots, 6 on target. What I will say is that outside of the goal, they put a lot of pressure on Chelsea, but actually never really that we say the goal was coming, but they didn't have anything clear cut. They didn't create anything outside of the goal. When they were able then to break away and they opened Chelsea up, it was a great counter-attacking move and they got that goal. So yeah, I think, it's fantastic to capitalise on Chelsea mistakes, but I wouldn't get carried away to say that Maestro's football is working, because I actually think there were lots of bits where Chelsea dropped deep and London City didn't know how to break that down. With the players they've got, you perhaps expect more. But they broke away really effectively. They scored a goal. Isabel Goodwin, good to see her performing in front of goal. I think she had a lot of games this season where she hasn't been able to hit the back of the net. And I think it was important then for her to get that goal. And for London City then, big result. Did well to capitalise on Chelsea's weaknesses. First result for them this season over one of the big teams, but they have gained very little ground in the mid-table battle, only a point. It's not bad, still gained a point over the likes of Tottenham and Everton, but there are teams that gain points and wins below that have closed that gap up a little bit now.
Yeah, as you say, I think that they were quite unlucky in terms of the results around them, just didn't really go their way. I think they ended up dropping because of Villa's win. I think they ended up actually dropping down the table despite the fact they picked out a point. But yeah, it's more the it's more the second half performance and it's more the result as a whole, getting a draw against the reigning champions. That's the way London City will look at it. Won't mean too much for the table, and where they finish isn't really going to matter too much now anyway. But yeah, I think it's more of a bit more of a statement than, it's more, the statement's worth more than the point is, really.
Yeah, absolutely. But as for Chelsea, well, on the back foot again then now at this point in the season. They move back behind Manchester United, who they had gained on, obviously, in the week. They're still in an okay position. It's still firmly in their hands. And if City beat Manchester United, which we would expect on Saturday, then Chelsea can re-jump that gap. And obviously, Chelsea play United on the last day of the season. But they're just making life harder for themselves. They're now only 2 points out of Arsenal. And we've said, obviously, loads that Arsenal have those 2 games in hand. But I was looking at today, and actually, this season, if Arsenal were to get to the Champions League semi-finals, they are playing Saturday. They're playing midweek and then weekend for the rest of the season, outside of the international break. If they don't, they've still got a minimum of 9 games left to play this season. So that congestion is going to have an impact on Arsenal in some sense. They're going to have to. I can't see how they win every game in that run. So it's not a given they'll be ahead. Chelsea had a real opportunity. If they win here, stay ahead of Manchester United, they'll be okay. They have just put themselves in a little bit more. It's just making their lives more difficult for themselves.
Yeah, exactly that. I think that, it could have been a lot easier, but as you say, they get to play the side above them, and they've got the points on the team below. And although I got called an idiot for saying that Arsenal won't win all their games in hand last week, I still stand by it. As you say, you'd much rather have the points than the games. Any football club, any person involved in football will always tell you that. So yeah, Chelsea are in a deep position, still very much in their hands, and I don't see United or Arsenal being perfect in the league until the end of the season. So everyone's got a silly result in them, and I think Chelsea, no need to panic whatsoever.
Absolutely. Welcome all to the stream as well. Nigel saying hi, H saying hi. H27 says, evening lads, Chelsea doing their best to get United into the top 3. Yeah, making the league competitive. Everyone's been complaining to Chelsea for years and making it uncompetitive, now helping everybody out. Phil saying, evening all, welcome to the stream, Phil. But that does round up our first game. Let's get to the next match then. Manchester United 2-1 Everton. United salvaging an important win. For a moment, this looked like it would be a similar result to the game between Chelsea and London City, where United, who scored earlier in the match, struggled to make that dominance count, and Everton stung back. But they were quite dominant in this game, Manchester United. However, struggled to create chances and signs. They're still missing Mirtza, Riviere and Sandberg.
Yeah, definitely one of those where not comfortable for United for whatsoever, and they'd preferred a much bigger win. We knew that Everton would be a difficult challenge, but as you say, they can dominate the game, they can dominate the momentum of the match, but they just didn't put it to bed, and they tested Brosnan with quite a few efforts. But for a goalkeeper like Courtney Brosnan, they were quite comfortable saves, and you've got to make her work more than that. Everton did well to just keep themselves in the game and then go and get that goal. Obviously, it didn't materialise in the end, in a really poor way to lose the game in the end. But I think that it's a massive one for Manchester United. I know it really depends how you look at this, because of course, on one hand, they struggled, and that is something that long term they're going to have to look at. But I think in the short term, this is a mentality shifter. By that I mean that this can really turn it around, because the feeling in the Man United camp right now must be absolutely massive. Of course, it'll be a lot of relief, but to win a game like that, when you know how important every single victory is, that does wonders for the camp. And I think that after a few rocky results, although they'd have probably preferred to win this game 4-0, to win with a last-minute goal will be really, really good, and they'll be going into the Champions League on a high, which is exactly where they want to be. So, yeah, the performance still wasn't perfect, but a massive 3 points.
Yeah, important victory. Everton, though, massive improved performances, continuing that run then under Phelan. They had a 4-match run where they won every game. This was, obviously, the result didn't come, but I think the performance was absolutely still there. The effort, I think, would have deserved a point. Defensively, they were fantastic. I think we speak there about United struggling for chance creation, but actually, they were so organised and disciplined defensively, just limiting United's opportunities. And there was a few times Courtney Brosnan was called upon. She stepped up to play every time, made some excellent saves. And that levelling goal, which for a moment we thought, Everton are getting back in this game, really well taken. I think Ima Cabado has been a breath of fresh air really for this Everton attack, alongside obviously bringing back into the fold Kelly Gargo. they've now got options up front. And yeah, Gabardo comes on, scores that header, and Everton get right back into it. I thought they were going to get the point. I really did. But United showing a way to get back in. But yeah, Everton really impressive.
Yeah, they were very, very impressive. I think that, as you say, it's the consistency that has impressed me most. I think that it's very easy that under an interim manager or under a caretaker manager that you get one result off the fact you've just sacked the manager and there's a bit of a breath of fresh air out the club. But the fact that they've managed to keep this consistency now over a run of games, not only against the weaker sides but also against the top opposition, is mightily impressive. And yeah, a bit gutting to not take anything from the game, but I think that they will be extremely frustrated with how they conceded that second goal, because it's a really poor goal to concede. At that point in the game, from a set piece, will always be critical. And it was a shame, because it ruined what had been 90 minutes of brilliant defending, and what was a brilliant performance was completely undone by one corner.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting back to winning ways, I wanted to talk about that set piece, because I wanted to ask you, as a referee, is that a foul on Courtney Brosnan, or have Everton got to do better there to protect their goalkeeper?
Yeah, they've got to be much better. I think that, of course, United are doing everything they can to try and put it off and to make it difficult. I think Brosnan's got to be stronger, and I think that someone's got to get in the way there. Even if you are on the border of fouling Awujo, you get in between your goal, especially in the 94th minute. Because at the end of the day, if you start pushing and shoving it around, all that's going to happen is the referee's going to stop the corner being taken, have a chat with you, and then you're both going to calm down. So, yeah, I think that it was a little bit weak from Brosnan. It was a little weak from Everton overall. And the fact that Malard has been able to win that header, in such close proximity to the goal, massive questions. You're in your own 6-yard box. Even if your goalkeeper is unable to come and get it, someone in a blue shirt's got to make contact with that. And I think they should be more frustrated with themselves. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it.
So not a foul by the letter of the law. Do we think there should be reforms around how corners are refereed? We've spoken. It's been a big point of discussion in the Premier League this season. We've not really seen it creep into the WSL, but it's the first time we've really seen players backing in, getting the goalkeeper physically out of the goal in order to score. We're not going to. I don't think there's nothing confirmed for next season yet, is there, on reforms around corners? But is that something that should be looked at? Because personally, as someone who watches football, it doesn't feel in the spirit to score a goal by backing one of your other players into the goalkeeper to allow the corner come in, you head into an empty net. That just doesn't feel like football. And if we see what's happening in the Premier League start to come across the WSL, I think that would be a massive shame.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I can't believe nowadays you see corners where either everyone's hugging each other in the 6-yard box, and it's just there's more people in the goal than there is actually out of it. And it's just trying to like almost rugby-like with the way they try and shove it across the line. Or you get routines where there's no one in the penalty area because everyone's starting off in the corner somewhere and then runs in. They're not too bad because
Well, that's how they used to do it. I was watching back the other day, clip from 2009, the Men's Champions League, and they all stand on the edge of the box and they wait for the corner, and then they all just run in and try to like you do it at youth football. But no, it's a far cry from nowadays where everyone gets in the 6-yard box, grabs onto the goalkeeper, and they try and just get it over the line by any means necessary. But it just doesn't feel like football to me. No. And I thought that was a massively disappointing way for Everton to lose this game, was because Brosnan physically couldn't get to the ball. Yeah. She wasn't even contesting with a player who headed it home. She was contesting with Awujo, who was just backing her out of the way to allow Malard into that position. But based on the letter of the law, you've got to be smarter about defending that Everton. I think, again, they weren't too worried about Malard because they thought she was so close that Brosnan would get the ball. But you've got to be smarter, get players in between there, make life easier for your goalkeeper, and don't allow them just to bully their way to scoring.
Exactly. The only way really to combat that at the moment is to also lean into the dark arts. Courtney Brosnan has got to lean into her, then throw herself back on the floor and go down screaming, because the referee's always going to give that, because the last thing you want to do is give a goal when the goalkeeper's lying on the floor screaming. So you have to you've got to be a little bit smarter there if you're Everton.
Well, it's gone the other way for Everton, hasn't it? It was the game against Manchester City where Ruby May scored from a corner, but Ayaki Yamashita threw herself on the floor, and that probably wasn't enough contact for me. Exactly. So, you've got to be smart there, and I think they could have played the game a little bit better. Age 27, the crowding in corners has been a thing for ages against United in a lot of games I went to last season. Well, again, I think there should be a rule across the league. I just think it's. I mean, United played by the rules. There's nothing wrong with that. It's the same thing we say about Arsenal in the Premier League. You know, it's not fun to watch, and we're putting an asterisk next to their Premier League title. But I enjoy that one, Phil. But they're playing by the rules that are currently set. Ultimately, I feel that is a problem. I feel football shouldn't be about corners, and that's what decided this game. But yeah, it was a bit of a disappointing way, I think, for this match to be settled. But United, they did have a lot of control. They failed to capitalise on it. They ultimately did get that goal over the line, and turn to Malard, who stepped up for them on so many occasions this season, stepping up once again. It's a real wonder why they didn't. Why their business in the window wasn't to bring in creators to create chance for them, and instead to bring in other strikers when they've got two who've been so prolific this season. But there we go. We'll never understand what United are doing there. But key players back soon for United. Back up to second as well in the league. They don't have fixtures on their side. They've also got a similarly difficult fixture list. It does feel like the next 9 days are really going to define United's season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, again, it just shows where United are at, though, because I think they've got a difficult fixture list, but exactly the same as what we said about Chelsea. It's in their hands. They've still got to go. They've got to play the side directly below them in Chelsea, and Arsenal they've got the points over Arsenal at the moment. So for United, obviously the difference is that we don't assume they're as inevitable as the other big three, because they do have that. They're more likely to falter, I think, out of the four of them. But it is in their hands. I think this is a real victory they can try and bounce off. Midweek, I think that, as you say, next 9 days defines their season. If they get through in the Champions League, then that is a massive, massive scalp. I think the first leg on Wednesday is absolutely vital, because they win that could just kickstart a win against. They win their next three, they're going to be in for a phenomenal end to the season. But yeah, massive games coming up. But the most important thing in football is that they're in control of their own destiny, and Mark Skinner will love to be in that position, because he knows that if his side get it right, there's nothing Chelsea and Arsenal can do to stop them getting in the Champions League.
Yeah, I mean, what do we do if Man United win the Champions League? Are we prepared for that situation?
Football should stop.
Yeah, that's
indefinitely.
It's about a good run, but there we go. Nothing can get better than Mark Skinner parading around Oslo with a Champions League title. But no, I think it'd be interesting to see how close they are to Bayern. I ultimately think over 2 legs they'll be beaten, but again, a lot depends on who's back. If they've got Sandberg and Riviere who aren't going to be back for the first leg, definitely not Sandberg for either leg, but there's a chance Riviere could be back for the second. They won't have Miyazawa for the first leg, and that's a big loss, but they may have her for the second leg.
Yeah.
So I think this is the problem. If United were going into the next 9 days having a fully fit squad, I think they could absolutely come away with Champions League semi-finals and having beaten the league leaders. I don't think they are as far from Manchester City as the game earlier in the season suggested. I think City have been incredible this season, but actually their last few matches, pretty much since the Arsenal loss, I don't think they've played particularly well. Obviously in that time the draw with Aston Villa, I think as we'll get to later, they didn't have to play particularly well against Tottenham. So I think there was an opportunity there, but they've got no Ziggy on for the City game, and we've seen how bad their midfield functions without Ziggy. They don't have Miyazawa for the first leg against Bayern, and we've seen how badly their midfield functions without Hinata Miyazawa. I think it's going to be difficult to see them picking up results over the next 9 days, but they're either in a position where they're out of everything, and the only thing they've got left to play for is Champions League football next season, or they're in a position where they've taken a big scalp in Man City and they're into the Champions League semi-finals. It could be such a stark contrast in 9 days' time. It feels almost similar for Chelsea. Chelsea could be in the Champions League semi-finals, in which case nothing that's happened this season matters if Chelsea get that step closer. But they could also be out of everything, and in which case you're going to have the same brigades are going to come back for Bonpastor. The same brigade that were happy on the League Cup final day are suddenly furious once again. But yeah, going to be very important over the next few days. Phil says, I fancy United to get past Bayern. Well, if you want to see what we think is going to happen in that after this stream, go and check out today's video where we predicted the Champions League knockout stages. Phil, I'm sure you're going to love our prediction of the Chelsea-Arsenal game. Get to that one, because so many Arsenal fans are loving it in the comments. So that has been good already. Let's talk Everton, though. What now for the Toffees? 6th in the league. No one below them was able to claim enough to get ahead of them. They're not going to catch Tottenham. 9 points behind them. I don't see them winning all of their last 4 games of the season. I think Tottenham will get at least 3 points. So they're not going to get any higher now. Big derby coming up next weekend, though. Where do you think they can finish?
I think that, as you say, that I think seventh is definitely or sixth is definitely the limit now. They won't get to Tottenham, but I think for Everton, it's more about performances. If you're feeling, it's about showing that you've got what it takes to come in and be the permanent manager. If you're a player for Everton, it's about impressing and showing why you deserve to be, starting in the team next season, why you deserve to be a part of the squad. Obviously, the Merseyside derby is always a game, no matter what. There's always something on the line in the derby, so that's a big one. So yeah, I think for Everton now, it's more about performances. The higher up they finish, obviously, the better. But I think that if Phelan can show that he's got what it takes to be the permanent manager, if the players get their chance to show what they're really made of, and if they can put a good run of form towards the end of the season together, they finish in the top half, and suddenly they go into next year on a massive, massive high. So yeah, I think they've got nothing to lose really after the Merseyside derby. So I think it's just about playing well and trying to play their best possible stuff.
I think wherever they finish now is fine. I don't see them finishing lower than 9th. They can't finish lower than 6th. Anywhere in there, I think it's actually a good season. I think the table makes zero sense. You've got Everton 6th, London City 7th, Aston Villa 8th. All of whom I think have been pretty poor at times. I mean, Everton until the turn of the year were terrible.
Yeah.
London City have been so patchy and inconsistent. And Aston Villa, I feel like they should have won every match and haven't won any of them. It's my assessment of Aston Villa this season. So it's very difficult to get rid of any of them. And then below them, you've got Brighton, who I think should have, similar to Villa, should have won every match and haven't. And then Liverpool, who, if it wasn't for loads of injuries in the first half of the season, probably would be a lot higher in the table. But yeah, very messy bottom half of the table. But Everton have put together a run of form. So Phelan, does he deserve the job full time then?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, I think it's now on him in these last couple of games to just cement that belief. He's done incredibly well. The difference between Sorensen and him is a stark contrast. So yeah, I think he's done incredibly well, and clearly he's got a good set of players there that back him all the way.
He's also Scouse, which I think is the most important thing, because I enjoyed Mark Skinner was talking, and then this Scouse fella came on. I'm like, well, we were really good there. I'm not going to do a Scouse accent; that'll be offensive to everyone involved. But yeah, I think for me, don't give him the contract yet.
Yeah.
Wait until the summer.
Yes.
Get into give this last 4 games of the season, see what happens. If they get drubbed by Arsenal, Chelsea, for example, then suddenly maybe you reassess looking at next season. But everything so far has been really positive. See also what you can get in the summer, not as in a bit of window shopping, not to put Phelan annoy him, because then you could lose him. But have a look at who's about. If you could, do you look at a Jocelyn Poirier? Is that someone you could consider? There are options out there, but I think he deserves the job. I think if he does enough in these last 4 games of the season, then absolutely giving it permanently, build around that next season. I think what they've got to do, Everton, is look at what's worked really well at the end of the season. Yeah. And that's not building out from the back and playing these lovely, overcomplicated football. They've moved the ball quickly. They have been a bit more transitional, a bit more direct. They have had 2 strikers up front who are able to combine well together. They've not been playing like Tony Payne up front. All the players are playing in the right positions, and they've just got to do that again. They've just got to go into the transfer market with a much similar mindset in terms of how much they're going to spend, or similar ambition, but a different mindset. Because last summer they brought in players. This summer they need to be smart, and actually, I think some of those players have been massive hits. I think players like Ruben Mace have been super successful. Vignola had a good debut, and then has tailed off throughout the rest of the season. But they've got players there who can really contribute. And they've got something to build from now, a platform to build from. They've got to use that rather than just scattergun recruit as many players as they can again. But yeah, let's move on then to another side who may need some recruitment in the summer in the form of Leicester City, because it's Leicester City 1-2 Aston Villa. Another game of 2 halves. We're watching this game together on Sunday, Harry. What did you think of the game?
Yeah, exactly that. I thought that, again, first half it was all Leicester, and I thought you couldn't tell they were the side bottom of the league. They were playing quite nicely. They were finding a lot of space, albeit Aston Villa were not in the game. They just refused to turn up, I think, for the first 45 minutes. Leicester did well to get the ball down. They were creating chances. They were getting shots where they're having opportunities. And then in the second half, it completely flipped. It was all one-sided. I think Leicester had 1-2 shots in the second half. It was completely one-sided in that second 45 minutes. And Villa eventually found a way, although it was late. But yeah, 2 very differing halves, which I think I'll be honest, I think this game completely summed up both these sides' seasons where, for 45 minutes, they both had their moments and looked really good and were the better side. And then they crossed over for the next 45, and then one went back to being terrible and one finally decided to turn up.
Well, to be fair, I think for Aston Villa, they usually have the 45 minutes and don't score the goals.
True.
And it's usually the first half. So a little bit different, but yeah, no, I agree. It does broadly sum up their seasons. Villa, though, I thought this was going to be another silly drop of points in the game. They really shouldn't be dropping points, but they did do enough to win. It puts them in a really good position. But yeah, as you say, I think in that first half, Leicester were probably slightly better. I mean, they created more dangerous chances. I thought they came forward really well. They had some decent opportunities. Only 5 shots, though, and only 9 touches in the opposition box isn't really good enough when you're the side that's kind of on top. I know they had less possession and it was very much breaking away as much as they could, but they still didn't really put Villa under enough pressure. But they did get that goal. Alicia Lehmann notching up a strike and putting Leicester City in a decent position. Good to see Lehmann showing what she's capable of, but also a big opportunity missed as well for Alicia Lehmann. Probably could have been slightly more comprehensive. That was right before the end of the half. That probably should have gone in, and that may well have been enough to see them out of this game. But Villa turned the game around really effectively. It was all really one player, the catalyst, and that Emily Salmon. Emily Salmon has really struggled to step up to the plate this season for Aston Villa, but this game was a game-changing sub.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought she came on and was just looked miles ahead of everyone else on the football pitch. She really turned up for Villa and kind of just inspired them to get going a bit. And I mean, I think it really helped that she's out of form, but she came on when there was. It's quite impressive to see a player that's out of form come on when her team are struggling and make a difference. And although she still didn't score, it was she did very, very well to kind of spark this comeback. And maybe it's because other people were taking it in turns to not score. But yeah, I thought Salmon came on, looked really, really sharp, just looked lively. Like, I think that the run of being on the bench has clearly had that impact because she looked ready to be back on the pitch. She wanted to be playing. She wanted to get going again. She was at 110%. Oh yeah, I was massively impressed by the reaction from the Salmon that we saw a few games ago that was struggling for confidence and really didn't impact the game.
Yeah, I mean, it gave someone for Hansen to play off because once again, Aston Villa continued this bizarre theme of experimenting with Noel Moritz as a forward. I really don't know what's been going on lately at Aston Villa, but we saw it in the City game, and she had a great opportunity which she missed because it's Noel Moritz and she's not a forward. But anyway, they brought on Salmon. I think that gave someone for Hansen to play off of. It gave them a new dimension to that attack, a different profile up there, and they were much more threatening. It gave them someone to hit in behind, and they did really well to break away quickly. So yeah, definitely an important substitution. They equalised as well, obviously, before, very early into the second half after that sub. That was from a corner. Salmon didn't play any role in that, but Patton heading that one home. And they did find that goal then towards the end of the game, 84th minute. It was Hansen somewhat fortuitous because Aston Villa had been knocking on the door, created chances, didn't really take anything though. Hansen then fired one to the near post and it goes through Janina Leipzig.
Yeah, it's one that Leipzig would definitely want back because I thought she had a decent game up till then, and it's a big blow. But on reflect, I mean, Hansen could have scored 2 or 3 before that, and it felt like that goal was coming. It was quite late on in the end, but Villa could have easily been 2-1, 3-1 ahead after 70, 80 minutes anyway. So yeah, a gutting way for Leicester to lose it though. They were 6 minutes away from a massive, massive point at home, and to concede a goal in that fashion will be frustrating. One ball over the top and a goalkeeper error is a very, very disappointing way to let anything from the game slip. But I think it sums up where they're at right now. When you are bottom of the league, when you are struggling, and you aren't picking up points, they're the kind of things that don't go in your favour. Leipzig could have kept that out. Maybe the ball over the top. Hansen could be half a yard offside. She might not control it well. Her first touch might be poor, but everything just fell for Villa there. And it's exactly what happens when you're in lettered position and you're really struggling.
Is that the lifeline gone?
Yeah.
Was this the option? Because the win, we saw it on the live table, would have put them into 11th, out of the drop zone, out of that relegation place. But it does feel like that's gone now for Leicester.
Yeah, of course, there's still 4 games to play and anything can happen. But I think when you're leading at home at half-time against a side that at the time were only 2 positions above them, I think that is a massive opportunity missed. They could have taken something this game. And to be honest, West Ham deserve to be bottom of the league. But yeah, Leicester let them off. They'll be really frustrated to be leading. No matter where you are on the table, no matter who you're playing, if you're leading at half time, you'll be disappointed if you walk away with a loss. And yeah, Leicester were really dropped off in that second half.
Yeah, it is now 7 losses consecutively for Leicester in all competitions. Their last win coming against London City, sorry. And they didn't beat themselves. So, difficult run for Leicester. Well, the first half of the season, they did pick up some points against run of play. It's just been misery of late. And the problem for Leicester is that even though they only have to play 2 of the top 5 in their last 5 games of the season, they have got that game in hand, of course. That's against Arsenal. Even though they only play 2 of the top 5, I don't look at games against Brighton, London City and Everton as games they're particularly going to win. No. Brighton at home, London City away and Everton away. Coupled with, of course, Chelsea at home and Arsenal away, they just don't look like games they're going to go on and win. And that, for me, is the big problem. Where do the points come from? Didn't think Aston Villa was going to be one that could have been. This was an opportunity. It's been and gone now. And I do think that could be it for Leicester City. Unfortunately, they just haven't been competitive. When it comes to that relegation playoff, the way they're playing right now, I could absolutely see if it's a Newcastle or Birmingham, it seems to change that position every week at the moment, Bristol City. I really think they could be in a bit of trouble, Leicester City. They didn't invest particularly well in January. They're feeling the effects of that now. And I do feel sorry for the club because it's not really the women's side's fault. They haven't got the money to spend. But there we go. As for Aston Villa, a big 3 points to then draw level on points now with London City Lionesses, which I don't think many people would have expected that at the top start of the season. I mean, ultimately, I'd have thought Aston Villa would be ahead of them, but there were a lot of the mainstream and Aslani who thought they were going to be in the top, who thought London City were going to be in the top 3, who wouldn't have expected that. So that race for 6th is tight, but Villa's starting to get some results towards the end of the season.
Yeah, they will be so frustrated that they are not miles clear of that bottom half by now. They should be up with Tottenham, if not ahead of them, based on some of the performances that they've had this season. I've been intrigued to see what the XG performance tables and things like that would say, because yeah, they'll be glad that they are finally starting to recover a little bit.
XG table, to be fair, has them lower, but it's worth saying that they have conceded 7 goals more than they should have.
Wow.
And I reckon that's only really levelling out because they picked up points against City and Arsenal, where they were outshot. But they've also had so many stupid results this season. Liverpool should be ahead of them based on the way they've played. Brighton should be well clear of this bottom half of the table, but they don't have a striker. So they get there and they can't put the ball in the back of the net. So yeah, I think Villa's game's been really mixed. There's been some where they've been really negative. There's been some, though, where they've had so many chances to not take them. I'm surprised to see that they've overperformed XG, but I think that's just Kirsty Hansen.
Yeah.
I think every other player has probably underperformed, apart from maybe Anna Patton, because she seems to head home everything. But yeah, it's been a mixed season for Aston Villa. I think they'll be frustrated, though, as you say, they're not higher up the table. I enjoyed Antonio's message. I didn't read this out because we were talking. But as soon as we clicked on Leicester, Antonio, a United fan, comes in the stream and says, just in time. Yeah. And then we just click straight over off of United. But there we go. Let's get in there to our next game. Arsenal 5-0 West Ham. I think this is probably one of Arsenal's better performances of the season. Looked really strong in this game. But I want to start by talking about West Ham because they were utterly abysmal.
Yeah, they were dreadful, to be honest. I think that, and again, I think it's very important to separate the two. You know, it's both. I think it's important to look at both performances here because, as you say, Arsenal were good. They did play well. West Ham were rubbish. Like you
can only play what's in front of you, can't you?
Exactly.
Arsenal couldn't make life more difficult for themselves. West Ham could have done anything better, and it would have been more difficult for Arsenal. But yeah, they can only play what they're in front of you. And I thought Arsenal played very well, but West Ham were absolutely tragic.
Yeah, they just did nothing. I've never seen a side be so not threatened whatsoever coming forwards, but be so open defensively. I mean, there were just some things. Where were their players? Because they weren't packing out. They weren't in the box, but they weren't scoring. They weren't attacking. They weren't doing anything. No one was doing anything. You take Katrina Gorey out this West Ham side, and they just fall apart. I mean, it was. I don't know what to say anymore about West Ham. As I said earlier, how they deserve to be bottom of the league just off this game week where Leicester were leading and West Ham were absolute rubbish. Yeah, they were well beaten at the Emirates. Arsenal took them to the cleaners. Of course, Arsenal were a very, very good side, but I mean, what an absolute mess of a performance from West Ham. Just as we thought they might be turning a corner with a brilliant point in the midweek. I mean, massive, massive contrast between the team and the way they played against United and the way they played and performed against Arsenal yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been 9. It really could have been. I think Arsenal missed the chance they should have scored. Russo and Kelly had so many opportunities that they missed. And then there were these utterly bizarre goals where Arsenal just put the ball near the goal and West Ham did the rest, really. The opening goal, let's start there. Chloe Kelly cross into the box. Blackstenius, it looked like initially she got a touch on it, hadn't. West Ham, how on earth does that bounce through and no one deal with it?
Yeah, I thought Blackstenius had got a touch on it. I thought
it was given as a Kelly goal.
Oh, was it?
Deemed that Blackstenius, because Kelly's been given the hat-trick because of it. And everyone was a bit confused. She had the match ball after the game, and everyone's like, well, she only scored twice. But it turns out the WSL gave that to Chloe Kelly, which I have to say, I was a little surprised by, but that is the judgment from the WSL.
They haven't communicated that with any other site, I don't think, because everyone else has got Blackstenius scoring. But yeah, I think
Opta, that's perhaps where the distinction lies. The WSL, who are powered by Opta, whatever, but I think Opta's given it to Blackstenius. The WSL gave Kelly the match ball and credit as her goal. Who knows?
That sums up the WSL this year, I think. But yeah, it doesn't matter whether Blackstenius touched it or not. The box defending from West Ham was all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That ball comes in, it bounces, no one deals with it, it bounces again, it then trickles almost over the line, and how nobody just stops it going in. It's utterly bizarre to me. But yeah, no way that should have been dealt with. After that, though, we did see King Ejemic put on some great saves the rest of the first half, and that kept them in it, really. I think, again, we saw Arsenal lack that clinicality. Russo, I thought, was really wasteful. Chloe Kelly had one at point-blank range, which, if she put anywhere else in the goal, would have been a goal, but it was saved well by King Ejemic. And that saved West Ham from a drubbing, but Arsenal were super wasteful, and actually Slager spoke about that in her post-match press conference, saying that, or the post-match interview, talking about how actually that she was really frustrated with the way they missed chances in the first half. They really dominated the ball, but was really proud of the fact they only limited West Ham to one shot, and then said we went through some tactical detail in the second half, and I think that was noticeable. They were definitely stretching West Ham better, and then they were able to take those opportunities. But I think she could have given more credit to the fact that some of those goals were a little bit fortunate, but there we go. As for the second goal, Chloe Kelly, I mean, what was the second goal? Was it the ball into the box that was then headed home by?
Yeah, it was the Russo.
Oh, sorry, Russo's goal. That's what I mean. I was trying to work out. There's so many goals. Cross it was a great cross in the box from Holmberg, but Alessia Russo unmarked, the freedom of the Emirates to head that one home.
Yeah, again, same problems with the first. It's box defending. No claret shirt at the front post. No claret shirt marking Russo. They're the two places you need a defender. It's good movement from Russo. We know that. We know Alessia Russo, her movement is brilliant, and that is why she gets away from her marker and ends up being alone in the 6-yard box. But from a West Ham point of view, how have you not got a player in either position? I thought Blackstenius did well as well, because she moves out of the way. She kind of runs forward and out of the 6-yard box, and Russo can just come in behind her and head it into the back of the net.
Yeah, absolutely. Way too much space. As for Chloe Kelly's second goal, or what was really should have been her first goal, a very good strike from the edge of the box. Would help if someone in a West Ham shirt closed her down, but take nothing away from Kelly's effort.
Yeah, best goal of the lot, because it was the one that had the most quality from it. Someone could have got out to her, but she knocked it round the defender, opened the body up, cuts it into the far corner. Really nice goal. A thoroughly deserved finish. And at that point, Arsenal were really kicking into gear. And that was the best goal of the lot. That was the one I was most impressed by. A good finish from Kelly, who had a really good game, probably her best game in a while. That really, that summed up West Ham's afternoon. Those 3 goals right there, and I didn't think it was going to get as worse as it did.
Well, I thought what summed up was a moment later when a ball went over the top, and the West Ham back 3 stepped up, and Blackstenius was in her own half still, so they just played it over the top of her.
Yeah,
and they were, and Blackstenius was front goal. No idea how even Nystrom gets back in there. Incredible piece of defending, and deserves full credit for that. And she was the only one who covered herself in any kind of glory. But I think we really saw how open a back 5 could look, and actually look a lot more open than a back 4 when your wing backs have to be the width, because they were pushing up, and it just left so much space which Arsenal were playing into very effectively. And I mean, Blackstone's really should have taken that opportunity. I don't think Nystrom should have been given a chance to get back in there. But yeah, that was a nice move. And West Ham's, I don't know how their defenders jumped up and didn't realise that Blackstone was still onside. Absolutely insane. But there we go. And then the Chloe Kelly third goal. I mean, what on earth are West Ham doing there?
Yeah, I can't explain it. I really can't. You're 3-0 down at the Emirates to one of the most informed sides in the league. Arsenal were playing very well in the game. They've been playing very well recently, and you're messing about with it in your own penalty area. I mean, it's just daft. It's absolutely daft. It doesn't matter what tactical principle or what way of playing you go into that game. If you find yourselves 3 goals down at the Emirates, you don't start messing about with it in your own penalty area. You just get rid of it. You just relieve the pressure. Yeah, I mean, an absolute mess, and Kelly pounces on it quite easily to finish. But yeah, I mean, what an absolute mess from West Ham.
Yeah, absolutely, and I just can't rationalise trying to play out from the back in that position. I don't think I've ever seen a more Chloe Kelly hat-trick. One that she didn't even score, a good goal but under no pressure, and then a goal that West Ham handed to her. There we go. But the WSL gave her the match for count as a hat-trick. So there we go. As for the 5th goal for Arsenal, I think this was the best goal for me. Some really nice football down the right-hand side. They were able to combine really nicely in the tight space. There's another thing that Slagers was talking about. No, I think it was Guarino actually was talking about it, saying we knew it was going to be difficult to deal with them in tight spaces, and we saw that. Arsenal used the ball really nicely in that last goal. So a lovely combination. And Mead touching it home. And I thought, it's a great finish actually from Bethany, wasn't it? And I thought that's what we need to see more from Arsenal, because the other 4 goals, great to win 5-0, but the other 4 goals don't happen every week, because that's not something that Arsenal are creating. And of course, every goal, you manufacture that situation to a certain extent by dragging West Ham wide and stretching them. You create confusion, you create issues for them marking in the penalty area. But for me, that was the best goal of the bunch. If they can play football like that more often, Arsenal are going to be a very strong team. My concern is that those passages are just not consistent enough. And I think there's certain players in that team who just can't do that. And that is a big problem. But we saw there it was between Mead, I think it was Calante and Fox. Yeah. Is it any surprise? 3 incredibly technically gifted footballers, and they combined really tidily. So that was a nice combination. And, I don't think it was Mariona, to be fair, because I think she was subbed off by that point. But whoever it was did really well in that combination. They worked well in that pocket of space, and they created that opportunity for Mead. So, yeah, that was the best goal for me. I think obviously a lot of people would say the Chloe Kelly strike, but I think under little pressure, you would expect a player of Chloe Kelly's quality to put that one in the bottom corner. But yeah, 5-0 then for Arsenal, absolutely dominant. One thing I want to talk about, how much of an advantage do you think the Emirates Stadium is? Obviously, we see lots of support there, and the Arsenal fan base is by far the biggest in the WSL, such a strong support, and that has an impact. But I also want to talk about pitch size, because we've spoken a lot this season about it being a problem for Chelsea. Playing at Kings Meadow, they've struggled often to break down low blocks. Because what I noticed here, and what I want to talk about, was West Ham last week against Manchester United played a very similar system. And there, it was very tight. And, of course, the differences between United and Arsenal, I recognise that. But they were very tight, very compact. They made life very difficult for Manchester United. And I felt a lot of the reason that West Ham was so stretched, or a part of the reason West Ham was so stretched, was because of Arsenal's pitch size. It's much bigger at the Emirates than a lot of these other grounds that they play at. And I think West Ham really struggled with the size of the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, there's a reason. I think Slagers is now the first manager to be unbeaten in her first 16 WSL games at home. And that is simply because of the Emirates. As you say, the pitch size allows that, it's easier to pull apart teams, because not only can you stretch them wider, but also, as you say, a West Ham team, you're used to defending as a low block when you're on a smaller pitch. So when you turn around and you know that 5 yards behind you is your next player. Somewhere like the Emirates, though, you turn around, you look for your left centre half, and you're wondering where on earth she's gone, because she's 10, 15 yards further in. So, obviously the pitch isn't that much bigger. There's the point.
But I think what it accentuates is that teams who have got very talented footballers have a lot more space to work with. And I think we saw that fully in this game, as Arsenal just had so much space. I don't think West Ham had the fitness to play on that kind of pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes a difference. And you're pulling apart this side, and suddenly if you're West Ham, you're getting pulled around, you're tiring, and then you've got, thousands upon thousands of people who are all back in the team that are against you. That momentum continues. And I think that's the other thing that we've seen Arsenal do at the Emirates, is that I think they've kicked on more in games. I know obviously there's been a couple of games where they have drop points or it's been 1-0, but they haven't. Also, say Slegers hasn't lost a game at the Emirates in the league, and I think that we see these. You look at London City away last week. They only get the 2 goals. They come home. They come home to West Ham. Yes, West Ham played a lot worse than London City did, but they get the 5 goals. So yeah, I think we've seen that crowd keeps Arsenal going for longer, and the pitch side, it tires the opposition out.
I think the biggest showing of it is that when they play against bigger sides, if you look at the result against Tottenham, for example, when they played that game away at Tottenham, they drew 0-0. When they played against Manchester United away from home, they really struggled, I think, again with the pitch size there, and they just didn't have the space to attack into. I think against Manchester City at the Joey, now City made that game really open, and Arsenal did get some goals there, but I think, again, they struggled to play the way they wanted to. Whereas their performance at the Emirates, and I'd extend it to Stamford Bridge, because, again, you've got a bigger pitch there, they were able to take full advantage of that. And I think that's perhaps, again, when you look at the Champions League, why they're able to be very consistent in that competition, because every team plays on the men's pitch.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that, Chelsea, to get an advantage, should be playing their Arsenal games at Kings Meadow. But they're never going to do that commercially, are they? When they're, trying to play on the smallest pitch size possible. But yeah, I think it does have an impact, but I think it's something that isn't talked about much by the media, so I just want to bring that up. But Arsenal in fine form, so many fixtures still to play. I mentioned it earlier in the stream, but a minimum of 9 matches, a maximum of 12. That's a lot of football.
It is a lot of football. I think, though, that their form will massively dictate how they go. I think that a long run of fixtures is wonderful and brilliant when you're consistent and when it's win after win after win and a win. You get a loss in there, and suddenly it can derail it. And we saw it last season with their WSL form. They were brilliant in the back half of last season. I thought they were absolutely brilliant. They scored a ridiculous amount of goals. They were winning 4. Didn't they score like 3 or more in like loads of games consecutively? And they were absolutely brilliant. And then bang, 1 loss in there, and then suddenly they dropped points in the next WSL game, and it affected where they finished in the table. So that will be the concern: is that 1 loss can derail you. But right now, they're banging form. They're playing some brilliant stuff. They're the most informed side in the league, bar Manchester City. And yeah, they're absolutely flying. So as long as that continues, this could be a brilliant run. But as I say, I think the chances, there might be a slip up in there, and it's how they react to that. Because if they get derailed like they did in the league last season, it could cost them. But if they lose and bounce back, or if they can just keep the wins going, then they'll end up finishing in a brilliant position.
Well, yeah, they're in a position where if they do get through the Champions League quarterfinals and the FA Cup, I don't know where they're going to put their league games, because obviously at the moment they are playing every Saturday and Wednesday anyway. If they get to the Champions League semi-finals, then they'll have to rearrange the Aston Villa game on the 26th and the Everton game on the 3rd. But what they'll also have to do is they could move those to later in the season, but if they get to the FA Cup semi-finals, they won't have another weekend in there. So they'd end up, I think, having to play something like a Tuesday-Thursday, because they have no other options. If they get to the semi-finals of both the Champions League and the FA Cup, that's the way the fixtures pan out, because they had the cancellation against Leicester, which they should have seen ahead of time, because they knew Arsenal were going to be playing in the FIFA Champions Cup that weekend. Easily could have done that in the first half of the season and thought about that ahead of time, but alas. And then they had the cancellation against Brighton, which was unfortunate. That was due to weather conditions. But that is creating a real issue now for Arsenal, because again they've got the fixtures, but if they've got to play 3 games in 6 days or something, which could end up happening, I don't see how they manage that. Yeah,
I think the thing that will save them is obviously that Villa game. We already know that if they are to get through, that'll be rearranged backwards, which is a weird way to do it, but I guess it's the only way.
But then that's going to be a few days after the international break.
Yeah, exactly.
So they won't have Emily Fox.
Yeah, it will hurt them, and I think it's going to be difficult. But success, that's how you be successful in the day. I think there will be a slip up in there, but it's about how they react to that. If they allow a slip on to knock on and hurt them, they'll be in trouble. But if they can bounce back and recover, then they'll be absolutely fine. Every go is massive for them at this point. They've got the games, but they've got to get the wins. So yeah, I think while they're in fine form, I wouldn't be too concerned for them. But it's very easy for one game to just throw a spanner in the works.
Yeah, Phil says the daft FIFA Women's Champions Cup, to give it its full name, sponsored, brought to you by Kinsica. It's been a nightmare for fixtures and having to have that stupid gold medallion on the kit.
Yeah,
it's way too big as well. That's my problem with the gold medallion.
Yeah.
But the fixtures, but again, that's something they should have seen, because we knew that game was going to be moved. Yeah. Because even if they lost the semi-final, they'd have still played the fourth place. They'd have still played the 3rd, 4th place playoff, and they still couldn't have played at the Emirates because the final was there. So they could have played that in the first half of the season. And it makes me think back now to the first half of the season where we had weekends of just League Cup action.
Yeah.
And it's just utterly bizarre. Why not put that on the week, have an extra game week in there, and then make the first half of this or the second half of the season a little bit easier. But again, we've still got a huge problem of overloading and underloading because Arsenal could have 12 games left this season. West Ham have 4.
Same
Maximum.
down.
That's it.
No, they could have 5th if they end up having to play the playoff.
True. So they could have the 5th, they go down, but that's not even half of what Arsenal have as a maximum.
No.
That's not even half of what Arsenal have as a minimum.
Yeah.
So for most of the clubs in this league, they've only got 4 games in the next 2 months. For some clubs in this league, they could have 12.
Wow.
Huge problem that's got to be solved with overloading and unloading. And I mean, you look how much they've struggled with the fixtures this season. We've got an extra 4 matches to fit in next season. And of course, the clubs not going into the League Cup will make things easier, the Champions League clubs, because they can play League Cup games on Champions League nights, and that should all work seamlessly. But it's still a lot of games to fit in there for the top clubs. But it's really important we have those games for the small clubs in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, it would be helped if they didn't decide to just put the Champions League semi-finals on a weekend. What?
Yeah,
That's stupid.
It's for the attendances, but
Doesn't
I think
matter.
I just don't think we should have that. I think it's so tin pot.
Yeah.
I don't think we should be trying to attract day trippers. I get we want to grow the sport, and that's great. But Champions League nights are special. There should be Champions League nights, not Champions League 12:30s or Champions League mid-afternoons with the sun out. That's not what we want. No sun. We want it to be dark. We want the aesthetic of a Champions League game.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Once you do that, suddenly that's 2 games each season that the big clubs don't have to rearrange if they get to the last 4.
Yeah, well, we do need to talk about West Ham because they had 1 shot in 90 minutes.
Oh, rubbish.
And should be bottom of the league right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Leicester let them off massively. There's not much to say on them because I think they're going to have to sort it out because they play like that for the rest of the season. There is a chance Leicester nick something somewhere else. Right now, I look at the way both teams played this match week, and I think Leicester are more likely to pick up a point than West Ham are.
I think for the problem for me is that West Ham have got nicer fixtures than Leicester. West Ham play London City at home, winnable. Liverpool away,
Yeah, Leicester have also got
winnable.
London City.
Well, yeah, but again, Leicester have got to get 3 points more than West Ham and a better goal difference. Liverpool away, Villa away, City at home. City at home's not particularly winnable.
They'll win that.
It's last day of the season, and City will probably put their kids out.
No, because I don't know.
Away from home, they're not lifting any trophies.
It depends if they're in the FA Cup.
Well, then they'll want to rest to be ready for the FA Cup. But yeah, I think West Ham have got the more winnable games in there, but yeah, they've not been particularly good, and this was a very, very poor performance. Let's move on then to Man City 5 to Tottenham. City continuing their title charge in style, but I have to say, I think this was less City being impressive and more Tottenham being absolutely terrible.
Yeah, if you don't look at the scoreline and you watch the game and you look at the stats, you wonder how...
You might have to clip out the goals.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. If you can count, you'll be all right. But yeah, if you watch the game without the goals and you look at the stats, you would wonder how on earth this ended up 5-2, and I still am. This, I don't think you could tell me that this was between the team top and the team in 5th. Tottenham were absolutely rubbish. I don't know what happened to them. They collapsed. They fell apart massively. The goals they conceded were rubbish. And I thought that, of course, City are very, very good. Well done, Khadija Short, and she is a very, very good player. But, if every striker in the league got that kind of time and space in the penalty area, then every striker in the league would currently be scoring 20-minute hat-tricks. Tottenham were really, really poor. And again, it's another game. They've done well this season, but that's now both games against Man City and a couple others in there where they've just completely fallen apart and have lost all sense of any defensive capabilities.
I think it's just the City games, isn't it?
Yeah.
They've been great in every other match, but for some reason, City are their kryptonite at the moment. But yeah, just so open. I think, we said in January that they were going to struggle in the Asian Cup period without Koga and Hunt. They need to bring in a centre back. They didn't. A lot of their fans said, it's okay, we've got Molly Bartrick, we've got, Ryan Brink who can play there, so we'll probably be okay. But I think what we've seen is that they're not going to be okay. The decision to put Nilden at centre back, what a bizarre one. Yeah. I don't think that was the right decision. I think that just went horribly wrong. But you can't just lose 2 players and suddenly lose the ability to defend. And Shaw had so much space to work with. 20-minute hat trick. It's history making and incredible. But Yeah, it was easy for Khadija Shaw. So much space, nobody marked her tight enough, and it was embarrassing for Tottenham because you could concede one header to Khadija Shaw, but to concede two and then concede three. Surely at some point you just get closer and stop letting her head the ball.
At the end of the day, you push her over and let her score a penalty. Just oh, you jump.
They need Ash Neville back.
Yeah, just the basics of defending fell away, and as you say, they should have recruited. But at the end of the day, Molly Bartrip is a footballer. She should be able to jump and challenge for the ball in the air with Khadija Shaw. Same for any other footballer on that pitch in a Tottenham shirt. They were really poor. All the goals were bad. I mean, corners. We spoke about corners. I don't want to talk any more about corners because I hate corners. But rubbish defending from Tottenham from set pieces. And I don't think any of the City goals were incredibly good.
No, not really. You had, I mean, it was all done by half time, wasn't it? Coffey had one off the post. Carolyn walked into the penalty. I mean, you could watch it. You watched it happen. Just walked into a load of space in the middle of the penalty area and scored. And my favourite quote from this game was from the co-commentator on the World Feed, Ariane Hinks, who said, "If you put cones in the box, they'd be defending the same as Spurs is doing right now." And if you imagine that in a German accent, 100 times funnier.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, they were so bad. And I think that's the best example because they were just so static. There was no attempt to try and deal with the football. There was no attempt to stop anyone. Anyone tried to stop Khadija Shaw. Didn't happen. And yeah, one of the worst defensive performances I've seen all season. West Ham's game, one of the worst performances I've seen all season. This one of the worst defensive performances I've seen all season. Tottenham were really good attacking-wise in the second half. And I think ultimately, yes, the game was done. City didn't really need to stop them scoring. And they were still unable to take chances. 15 shots in the second half, 1.85 XG, 27 touches in the opposition box, 3 big chances, and they only scored 1. They really could have turned this game around. But yeah, they were so poor in the first half defensively. So much space for Khadija Shaw. And it was, pretty disastrous game for Tottenham.
Yeah, they've had too many of these this season. Some they've been on the right side of, some they've been on the wrong side of, some have been equal. Obviously, they beat Villa 7-3 at Villa Park. They lost this one 5-2, and then they had the 3-3 draw at the Leigh Sports Village in Manchester.
London City 4-2 as well.
Yeah, they've had too many of these games, and I think that it's not similar. It's a little bit similar in terms of results and the way they play. A little bit to Brighton last season, where they look brilliant going forwards, and there's been some really good defensive performances from them this season. But there's been others where they have just forgotten how to defend, which you cannot do at the top level. We've been talking about Tottenham at times this season. They look like a Champions League side, and then there's games like this where they look like relegation fodder once again. I can't believe I just said that, but I think that they've got to find a way to be consistent, and it will come another big window, and they will get there. Martin Ho is still growing as a manager as well, so of course they've got time, and the groundworks and the potential look strong. But some of the fundamentals are falling away in certain games, and that is not good enough at any level, let alone in the top level, let alone when you're playing the soon to be champions.
I think for me, I get what you're saying. I do agree. I think they were poor in this game, but it is Martin Ho's first season. I think there was always going to be teething issues. You're adapting a play style which was so effective abroad into the WSL. It's always going to be quite difficult. I think, again, the setup in both City games, and I get why he's doing it, because City's kryptonite is being hit in transition, right? So if you make the game quite transitional, you can gain something from that. And I just don't think it was the right decision on either occasion. You look at how they played against Chelsea and Arsenal, right? They sat really deep, and they only lost 1-0 and 2-0 to Chelsea.
Yeah.
They drew with Arsenal, and they'll play them again on Saturday. And maybe the Emirates will make a difference again. But I could absolutely see Tottenham getting something from that game. But the way that City are so good at just knocking the ball forwards and moving the ball forwards quickly, they're really good at moving the ball. They're really good at playing against teams who are going to move the ball quite slowly. So Chelsea and Arsenal this season have been very ball dominant, and Manchester United as well. If you just drop deep, they haven't got the space to attack into.
Yeah.
But City are really good at inviting you to press them, knocking around you, just full. It's very much what Tottenham are doing, but with the best players in the world.
Yeah.
It's a very similar system. It's very transitional, very direct, and they move the ball so well, Man City, and they just absolutely utilised the space that Tottenham had vacated. I think it was just too open. I get the thinking from Ho. He wanted to exploit City's weaknesses, and actually they did do that twice. The breakaway goal for Olivia Holt, showing her quality, was fantastic, and I think that showed exactly what they wanted to get. Yeah. The problem was you can't concede 5 goals because you're not going to score 5.
Yeah.
And so that was a big issue. But I do get what Martin Ho was trying there. I just think it was the wrong decision and went horribly wrong, really, for Tottenham. Let's get to our last game. We've had loads of goals there, so let's get to the game with no goals. Brighton 0-0 Liverpool. Very cagey affair, Harry. Neither side created anything in this game.
I loved this game because, as you say, City, Tottenham, goals galore. Arsenal smashed West Ham, Chelsea and United and Villa, all loads of drama going on in those games. And these two just decided to have a very cagey affair where nothing really happened. Neither side ever looked like scoring until we got into additional time. Yeah. And I think this was the fairest 0-0 of the season so far.
Honestly, if you came to me and said Vidicic and Gareth Taylor had met up before the game, shook hands and said we both need a point, I wouldn't be surprised. Because none of them wanted to win this match. No one did anything. For 90 minutes, no one did anything. It was quite forced by Brighton. I think Brighton, they know how they want to play, but they just went quite defensive with their setup.
Yeah.
And Liverpool couldn't really break them down. I think maybe if they had Nagano and Shimizu and were able to control the game a little bit better, maybe they'd have broken them down more effectively. But the stats are incredible. The two sides cumulatively didn't create 1.0 XG, which is incredible. 0.55 to 0.32, 9 shots to 11, 3 on target to 4 in favour of Liverpool on both those stats, in favour of Brighton on XG. 28 touches in the opposition box from Brighton, and they took 9 shots.
What are they doing?
But every 3, they had a shot for every 3 touches in the opposition box. That's terrible. Just knocking it around the box. And then Liverpool, 21 touches. Both created 1 big chance each. That was Venegas' header in the 92nd minute, which was saved fantastically by Jennifer Falk. That was the only big opportunity they really had. And it was Silag's effort in the 94th minute, where she broke in behind and probably should have scored. Outside of that, nothing.
Yeah, I mean, Pomay did all right in the very, very last minute to hook one off the line, but again, that was a header that deflected off the back of Grace Fiss's neck and looped goalwards. Yeah, it was. I mean, it was one of those. I think a lot of those touches as well became because there was loads of those scrappy moments in additional time when no one could clear the ball, but no one was poking it goalwards. Yeah, it was. As you say, I think it's a point that both sides will be happy with because they're both in that midfield fight, and right now a point is good enough to gain on the majority of teams. I mean, both sides gain on Leicester and West Ham. They would have expected to gain on London City because that should, you wouldn't have thought London City would have got anything. So they would have expected to gain there. So yeah, I think it's one of those where a point kind of suited both parties.
Yeah, I think if you put these two sides together and the managers together, I think you'd have one of the best teams in the league.
Yeah,
because Brighton had really good at creating chances, but they didn't really show it in this game because they didn't get forwards much and they missed a lot of their players. But they don't really have a goal scorer, and Liverpool were lacking a creator in this game without Nagano, without Shimizu. Those two controlled the game without Bergstrom to create anything. They just didn't create anything, and they just didn't score. I think Beta Olsen was very quiet in this match. And yeah, it was one of those games, really, wasn't it? Neither side wanted to win. Both sides were happy with the point. And as Jeremy says in the live chat, once the stream of the Oasis, when a draw suits both teams, that tends to be what happens. Absolutely. But yeah, that is the end of WSL Game Week 18. We're going to get to Aerial Fantasy in just a moment, but Phil's saying, how on earth did Robert Villaharm get the Portland Thorns job? Yes, I remember seeing that one pop up on my LinkedIn. Because Rob Villaharm connected with me.
Oh, right. Give him a ring and ask him.
I'll ask him, how on earth did you get that job, mate? But yeah, I was stunned that had happened. But he's not a bad manager. It didn't work for him at Tottenham for a variety of reasons. But it does feel like one hell of a job to step into when you've just had a disastrous season at Tottenham where Martha Thomas was playing as a right winger for most of it, and then you have a year off and then become the Portland manager. It's like failing upwards. Like company's appointment of Bayern. I think he's won his first 2 games, hasn't he? In the NWSL.
It really depends though if he's going to play everyone in their right positions.
They've won their first 2 matches. They beat Washington Spirit by 1-0, and they beat Seattle Reign 2-0. So as it stands, they haven't conceded and they're unbeaten. So maybe
Villa will go win the end of the
but I think that it's a very different league, and I think a league that is less tactically complex is suited to Robert Villaharm, and I think that NWSL is less tactically complex. It's about man management, and I don't think we ever had any complaints about Villaharm's player management. I think ultimately his failings were very much tactical, but we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Maybe he's going to win the NWSL Championship, something that Jonathan Garaldes couldn't do. But that would prove that Robert Villaharm's better, and if he was the Barcelona manager or the Lyon manager, he would win the Champions League. Let's get to aerial fantasy then, where I've had a fantastic run recently, but a bit of a drop off this week. I still gained on a lot of people. I still had a positive green arrow, but it could have been a hell of a lot better. I had the highest. Did I have a higher score than you this week?
Nope.
Rubbish. 7 points this week. Falk with 10 massively helped me on the Sunday. Nothing across my backline though. Berman 2, Kasparov 2, Nak 1, and Nice Wonga 2. Not ideal there. I brought in Nice Wonga this week because she's a visionary. I didn't think they were going to concede to Leicester. I thought that was a banked on 9. None of my other defenders are visionary anymore though, because everyone else has got them. I've also lost a lot of my visionaries, which is a bit annoying. Jess Parker picked me up 7 for that assist. James got me 1 as well. 4 from Kerry Holland because she got a bonus. That would have been visionary points, but she, again, no longer visionary. Kendall in there as well, who I brought in because she's visionary. Didn't do anything. I thought that, she'd keep a clean sheet. That was nailed on 6. Very disappointed by Aston Villa conceding in that game. 2 from Beta Olsen, who didn't really do anything, and 34 from captain Khadija Shaw. I think everyone got a minimum of 34 this week, because if you didn't captain Khadija Shaw in a fixture, she always gets a hat-trick. That's disappointing. Also benched Cabardo, which was a massive shame, because she scored 8 points, a visionary who scored the leveller in that match.
I edged you out this week by 3 points, 70 for me. Back-to-back weeks now with a 70 score.
Wow, consistently boring.
I was let down actually by my big players and picked up by the sides towards the lower end of the table. I had Tullis Joyce 2, Kasparov 2, Fox 1, Thompson 1, who all kind of let me. I mean, obviously Khadija Shaw got 34, so that kind of makes up
okay then, yeah.
But yeah, so all the big sides let me down. But I had 8 from Grace Fisk with a big clean sheet against Brighton, 7 from Olivia Holt, who obviously got her goal against Man City, despite that lost 5-2. 9 from Kirsty Hansen, reliable as ever, had all season. She just keeps scoring goals. And then 2 from Gautset, 2 from Olsen, and 2 from Vandela. I'll be honest, I did forget to do my team. So I did get quite lucky in that aspect.
There you go, just do that everywhere, you'll be alright.
But yeah, so I got away with 1 there. 70 points, 30 points, or 24 points above average. I'm still dropping down in our league, right, because obviously I was doing so well. But now I'm just getting outscored, despite the fact I'm doing well.
I'm 39th now.
That is not good.
I'm chasing, but I think a lot of the problem I had this week was that I didn't have any Arsenal players. So I just didn't gain any of the points from them winning 5-0, whereas at least you had Emily Fox.
We shouldn't start.
Rough there.
If I'd done it, yeah.
But yeah, no, I didn't have any Arsenal players. I think let me down. But
unlucky.
And I should have gone Hansen over Kendall, but I thought Villa were more likely to keep a clean sheet than Hansen to score.
That's it. Why would you think that?
I don't know, and I'm going to bench for Villa players or sell them next week because they've got Chelsea. So we'll see what happens there.
I think I might keep Kirsty Hansen in there.
Might captain them.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see what happens. We are back tomorrow night. The Champions League quarter-finals are upon us. Chelsea taking on Arsenal and VfL Wolfsburg taking on Lionesses will be live from 5:30 all the way through until 10 o'clock. So if you want to watch us for 4.5 uninterrupted hours, you can do so. Slight interrupted hours. We will be taking a break in between the two. If you want to watch us for almost 4.5 in uninterrupted hours, join us tomorrow night for all the Champions League action. In the meantime, if you want to know how those Champions League games are going to go down, well, we whacked out the crystal ball this morning and we found out our predictions for the Champions League. Chelsea are going to win it 5-0 every game. So go check that one out. That video went out this morning. So if you haven't already, go and give that a watch. And let us know who you think is going to win the Champions League. That, though, is everything from us today. Thank you guys very much for watching. And we'll see you next time.